So yeah, we are here with Chance Barnett from Crowdfunder on the rooftop of the digs here in Venice, California, right off of Abbot Kinney. How you doing, Chance?
I'm great.
Keller. Well, explain to us what Crowdfunder is, when it started, and how it came to be.
So Crowdfunder is leading equity crowdfunding platform that allows entrepreneurs to raise investment capital, debt or equity, from currently accredited investors. The company was started, I've been a longtime entrepreneur, a couple of successful companies under my belt, a couple of lessons, as we would call them, as entrepreneurs. And about 5-6 years ago, I switched a little bit to the other side of the table and started advising and investing in very early stage companies. About 3.5 years ago, while I was doing some investing, I saw an opportunity with a few folks that wanted to help change the laws that govern investing in the US. I called them up. They were proposing a simple change that would effectively allow startups and small business owners to use the web to fundraise more publicly and openly. And I ended up, long story short, getting involved with them, going to Washington, D.C., and engaging in a grassroots campaign among a group of people that became a portion of the Jobs Act. And so it was during that a couple of great things happened. I was able to acquire the crowdfunder.com domain because I believed there would be a huge market opportunity here. But other than the market opportunity, what I'm really interested in is helping entrepreneurs. I wish that I had had Crowdfunder when I was an early young entrepreneur. I hadn't fundraised before. I didn't have a great network for myself, but I had a good idea and some traction. And so what we really do is create a process and a platform for investment-ready entrepreneurs to raise capital in a more social way and really help them transform the social capital that a lot of them already have around them into actual financial capital.
Right on. Now, are there any minimum requirements, either as a company seeking investment dollars or an investor who wants to give equity stake in some of these companies that are featured on the site?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we allow people to invest. One of the unique things about what we do is oftentimes if you wanted to invest in a really great technology company, you might be crowded out by venture capitalists. And a lot of times people are going to venture capitalists and getting most of their money. What we're doing is oftentimes letting people invest alongside VCs and experienced investors and get into those deals for, say, $1,000 or $5,000 or $10,000, which even 3 years ago wasn't a possibility for most people.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess using one of the more public examples, how did the Neil Young's Pono campaign work?
So this is a good example, I think, that defines the difference between what we do and what sites like Kickstarter do. So Crowdfunder actually came and engaged with Neil Young after he had done a Kickstarter campaign where he pre-sold 15,000 devices of his Pono music player. Pono music is Neil's vision to restore sound quality as the artist intended it to digital music. So he has an amazing player, which also connects to a music store where you can buy higher quality audio files. He pre-sold on Kickstarter 15,000 units of his player. He then needed an additional $5 million of financing to grow the business, to purchase more inventory, and to really get going. And Neil didn't quite want to spend 6 months going to Sand Hill Road, even though he has venture capitalist friends. He also wanted to give that same community that helped start the company and pre-purchased it the opportunity to also get upside and buy shares in the company. So they came to Crowdfunder after they had built a community on Kickstarter and offered them and a much larger community on Crowdfunder the opportunity to invest. In just about 12 days, we were able to get about $10 million in investment reservations made. So, and that was from 46 countries, 6 continents. What Neil had was an existing, huge, amazing community. So the success of the campaign was in part the lifelong reputation that Neil's built and his vision for the company and the community that he's built, and then also our amplifier of that and our existing community where those things came together, and that brought the financing they needed to formally capitalize the company and move on.
Awesome. And so in addition to that, what have been some of the other big wins for the past year, for 2014?
Sure. So in 2014 was actually really the first year we had regulatory cover to start doing more open and live investment transactions on our platform. Prior to that, we couldn't do that more publicly. So we had a fantastic set of growth. We helped close 44 deals in the year. The average size was about 1.6 million in size. Generally, those were seed and Series A rounds, but sometimes a little bit later. And we're attracting an increasing set of deal flow that already have great lead investors in, like Sequoia Capital, like Techstars, companies coming out that aren't ones that are just raising crowdfunding because they don't know where else to find money, but also see this as an opportunity to build their brand, to get awareness, and to potentially find investors that are going to be value add. Yeah. So closing those deals, we've done roughly 60 million across all of those deals. So I think that was a great first year, and the market's growing so quickly. People are starting to understand the power. And one of the things that's unique that's happening for us is, and I think this is unique about being here in LA, we're at, in a lot of ways in LA, the cross-section of digital media, technology, and entertainment. And so what we've been doing in the center of that community is going to a lot of the influencers that already have a large set of followers, like Neil Young, and working with them on the companies they own or that they're a part of, and using those communities to really help leverage the financing. And that's really, really exciting, going well.
And are there any of those that you're allowed to name at this point, or are they still?
We'll probably launch a few in the next month or two, so I can't talk about the deals that haven't launched yet.
Sure. Going back to the genesis of all this, you took a pretty big gamble in time, in resources, in money, to get this thing going. I mean, it's not very often that somebody's going to go to DC to change policy to start a business. Explain some of the stuff that was going on in your head and the virtues of tenacity when you got an idea, you go to the mat for it, and you're willing to stick with it for a long period of time like you have.
Yeah. For me, I would say that one of my favorite qualities that I believe leads to success in entrepreneurs is perseverance and tenacity. I'd like to think I'm the most brilliant CEO, but what I probably have more in spades is an unflinching desire to achieve and to solve problems. And so I think a lot of people, and in some ways rightfully so, shy away from businesses that deal with regulations, that deal with policy and legislation. But if you embrace that and you say, I'm willing to have the fortitude to go out and help affect change and start a business in the space, it can become a real key advantage. So for me, it was not only a great experience personally, to learn more, to be a part of something that I think is really impactful, but the knowledge I had, the ability to participate, helped me create thought leadership for myself and the company. And that has extended into our brand, into our reputation. And that's something that you can't just replace saying, I built some great software, now come and use it.
Right. And then likewise, I mean, this isn't your first rodeo. You've had multiple companies over the past decade plus. When do you learn to say no and to pursue a different path?
Yeah, so I've had a string of successful companies and then several not. And one of the things I've learned is that every serial entrepreneur has their failures. That's one of the things I actually like most about Richard Branson, is that he talks really openly about his successes, and he doesn't credit himself with all of the reasons why it succeeded, and he also talks openly about his failures. So for me, I've had several of my own failures and spent a lot of my own money. For me, there's just nothing else I'd rather be doing than solving meaningful problems, creating value for people. I've done stuff in the music space. That's how we first connected, because I'm really passionate about music in the online music community. And now I get to do it around more specifically entrepreneurship and finance. So for me, it's I never felt like I needed to be told that I had the credibility to go out and do something. No one told me that I had enough credibility or their knowledge and understanding to say I can become an expert in securities law. But I knew enough people in finance, I knew enough people in that world, and I had various connections to say, you know what, that person can be me if I just take the time to really think about it and align myself around existing thought leaders and really learn from them. So I would say the other big piece to that is, one, sometimes I'm not fearful enough. And that works out sometimes, but it also gets you into some trouble. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs can identify with that. Like, as much as I've created opportunity for myself, I've suffered a lot of pain for the risk I'm willing to tolerate. But the other side of that is other people that are smarter and more experienced will recognize that and see that you're out there trying to do something new or disruptive. And if you're lucky and if you know how to approach them, they'll become mentors or advisors or accidental mentors to you, and you can really learn a lot. So that's been a big piece of development, and I would say success for me is finding more people who are a lot smarter and a lot more experienced, been doing something in that field for 20 years, and see if I can spend time with them once a month and really start to learn something. It's incredible the amount of wisdom those people can impart. So I love my role at Crowdfunder now because I get to do that in the world of financing and fundraising, whereas a lot of entrepreneurs are first time raising financing and they don't know how a cap table plays out in 5 years. They don't know what VCs are going to try and do later. And I see 500 companies and exactly their strategy a month, if not more. And so now I get to be one of those people who has some more wisdom to impart as people are going down the entrepreneurial road.
Right on. Well, getting back to policy for a second, and pardon my ignorance, but for the benefit of everybody watching, can you explain the difference between Title II and Title III of the Jobs Act and how that affects what you're doing with the company?
Sure. So I think there's some confusion about where things are at right now. I'll say definitively, the Jobs Act is here. It's just not all of it's here. So we have the ability, which is a complete change and transformation to existing laws in the US that allows you to go out and publicly advertise on the web to fundraise. So you can let anyone and everyone know that you're fundraising, which you couldn't do before. And some people didn't know that. So Title II of the Jobs Act specifically is the thing that allows for that. And it's a ban or removal on what was called a ban on general solicitation. And that just meant that you couldn't let anyone that you didn't already have a pre-existing relationship know that you're fundraising. So that's been lifted as long as you meet some minimum filing requirements, which is really just about going online and letting the SEC know how much you're raising and when. Okay. That's Title II, and it's already in effect, which allows you to go on a site like Crowdfunder and publicly announce to your community and everyone else, both on Crowdfunder and in your own social world, that you're fundraising. Title III, we're still waiting on, and this is what some people consider the true equity crowdfunding, which is if and when we can allow non-accredited investors to invest. So this is a little bit of a point of confusion, I think. While you can let anyone know that you're fundraising today under Title II, not anyone can invest. So Title III would simply say people below a certain income, which aren't deemed accredited investors, under Title III they would be allowed to invest in the future, and we're still waiting on that to happen.
Yeah, and then, but you've been through this for a while with this, with the service. Even before the Jobs Act even passed, the site was live. Everything was running. What kind of things were you doing to create mass awareness, both personally through your individual efforts as well as like marketing and exercises through the site?
Sure. So one of the things I think a lot about when you're building a business and you not only want growth, but you're building it in an area or a market where credibility and trust is important. And I would say we're in one of the markets where that's most important. In fact, it's paramount. And it's also a challenge to find and build and earn that trust in our space because a lot of people, I think, have perceived equity crowdfunding as the Wild West. So as I started out the business, there was already this notion that this is a scary thing and people don't know what's going to happen. So I saw a really big challenge ahead of us, which was how do we build credibility? And then we couldn't execute on our core business model, which was allowing people to actually transact investment. So we had this huge problem ahead of us. Stop for a second.
That's fine.
So I would say at the founding of the business, I saw two really huge problems that we had to work to solve, which were how do we build credibility and trust? And then two, how do we add any value in order to grow our user base when we can't execute on our core value proposition?
Right,
So your question's a really good one. We did a couple things, and some of them actually work together. So what I like to do in business is, and it's when in doubt, always the thing that I go to that I know is will set a compass for me, which is who is my most important customer and what is deeply valuable to them. And so it's obvious that one of my most important customers at Crowdfunder are entrepreneurs fundraising. What's most important to them? Getting money in the bank. And if I can't do that, what else can I do? Well, other things that are important to them are meeting investors, even if I can't transact it.
Yeah.
So what I thought deeply on that, and one of the things I came to is, well, if I can't transact, I can still, like a social network, introduce people and I can get them together, but I just can't show them an invest button and I can't show them how much they're raising. So what we did at Crowdfunder was to solve for both trust, and credibility, and to provide a value proposition of how do you meet investors, we started off by opening our platform just as basically an online pitch solution that worked with existing funds and investors. We did one of our first ones here in LA and worked with several seed investors and funds, and they basically put up an investment prize on Crowdfunder and said, we're interested in meeting the best tech companies in LA, and that was a pitch contest that ran through Crowdfunder. So suddenly there was a value proposition for startups to join Crowdfunder, to get their startup on our platform and put it in front of those potential investors. We ran an online competition, and then the crowd and those investors help us select the top 10, who then pitched at a live event. So that literally virtually and in the real world connected entrepreneurs and investors, and suddenly I had a fairly compelling value proposition and reason to be on Crowdfunder, even though I couldn't develop my own service. So I think there's a lot of opportunities if you just think really, really deeply about what is value to my customer, that you can come up with innovative ways, but sometimes it would be much better if you could just execute on what you really want to do.
Right, right. And then in closing with this thing, this has been a 3-year marathon for you so far, and it can be pretty taxing to anybody of any sort. How do you maintain a proper work-life balance so you don't drive yourself crazy on this stuff?
So I think I have a very different perspective on this than most people. I don't at all. I told you. It's amazing. But we cry, it's like dive bombers.
It's part of the neighborhood.
Yep.
It's all good. So as you're saying.
Yeah. So I have a very different viewpoint on work-life balance. I don't when I'm an entrepreneur in the first 3 to 5 years of startup life, and sometimes even beyond. My version of balance has a much longer wavelength. So I love to go all in on my startup because I know it requires that for me to get it to hockey stick. So I don't even imagine that I'm going to have work-life balance, and I do pay a big psychological and physical price. But I know that there's oftentimes on the other side of that a year, 2 years, 3 years, or an entire life of financial freedom on the other side of that. So I'm willing to sacrifice 3 to 7 years of my life where I dramatically change my day-to-day life, and I don't expect to have any work-life balance. Now, I pay a psychological price. My employees think I'm over intense and sometimes grumpy, and I am. So, I'm being extreme, but for the first 3 years of the business, first 2.5, I work 7 days a week, and there's nothing else I wanted to be doing. But this is coming from a guy who's done this several times, and I had the lucky opportunity to come out on the other side of that 3 to 7 years, and then have the means to not work at all, invest in stuff, create new startups, and I moved out of the country. I surfed for a year. Like, I've done a lot of different things with my life, and if you look at, I think, kind of net of the time that I spent off for an entire year or two just surfing and traveling the world, and then you add it back into the 5 or 7 years that I spend just being a maniac, that's work-life balance to me, and I really relish that longer time off. So I have a different perspective on it.
Right on. Well, very cool. Well, Chance, thanks a lot for your time, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Awesome.
That was great. Good